Ever wondered why the most incompetent people often end up in charge? Why the clueless manager gets promoted, or the mad emperor sits on the throne while wiser souls languish in obscurity? It's a bitter paradox of history and human nature. Psychologists have a name for part of this phenomenon: the Dunning-Kruger effect, a cognitive bias where people with limited ability wildly overestimate their competence. In other words, the less you know, the more certain you are, and that blinding certainty can catapult fools into power. Meanwhile, the truly competent are often full of doubts, hesitant to push themselves forward. This imbalance, the confident ignorance of fools versus the cautious wisdom of the wise, is one of the disturbing reasons stupid people gain power. But blundering self-confidence alone isn't the whole story. There are darker forces at play, insights that were observed 500 years ago by a shrewd Florentine thinker. Niccolò Machiavelli, the Renaissance political philosopher, understood these truths of power all too well. He witnessed firsthand how cunning and deception often triumph over ability, and how appearances can matter far more than reality. In his notorious treatise, The Prince, Machiavelli pulls back the curtain on the strategies that allow the unqualified to seize and keep power, strategies we still see in action today. To understand why stupid people gain power, we must journey through history and psychology, from the gilded halls of ancient Rome to the modern corporate boardroom, guided by Machiavelli's stark wisdom. Niccolò Machiavelli, the Renaissance political thinker, grasped the dark truths of power centuries ago. He famously argued that a leader's image often matters more than reality, and that deception is a legitimate tool in the quest for power. Machiavelli lived in a tumultuous era of princes and warlords where he observed a sobering truth: what people believe is often more powerful than what is true. Everyone sees what you appear to be, few experience what you really are, he wrote bluntly. In politics and leadership, appearance is everything. A leader can be inept or corrupt behind closed doors, yet if they project confidence, strength, and competence, the masses will follow. Image trumps reality. Machiavelli knew leaders could wear masks of virtue and wisdom, even as they acted with vice and folly, and get away with it. Why does this work? Machiavelli had a cynical answer. People are simple-minded and easily fooled by their immediate needs and impressions. He observed that human nature makes us prone to deception. Men are so simple of mind and so much dominated by their immediate needs that a deceitful man will always find plenty who are ready to be deceived. In other words, there's never a shortage of suckers. He who lies boldly will find believers, especially if those lies flatter the audience or confirm what they wish to believe. As Machiavelli put it, he who seeks to deceive will always find someone who will allow himself to be deceived. This grim insight explains why charlatans so often prosper. There is a willing market for the comfortable illusions they sell. Machiavelli didn't just describe the problem, he virtually provided a playbook for power-hungry fools or clever tyrants to rise. He advised that morality and honesty are often obstacles, not assets, for those seeking power. Virtue can be faked. Deception is a means to an end. Never attempt to win by force what can be won by deception, Machiavelli advised, highlighting that cunning trickery can achieve what brute strength cannot. In Machiavelli's view, lying, scheming, and putting on a show are legitimate tactics if they secure one's rule. A leader need not be truly good, he argued. He only needs to appear good when it suits him, appear just merciful and upright, but do whatever it takes behind the scenes to stay in power. These Machiavellian principles illuminate a dark reality. Incompetent or even foolish individuals can climb to power if they master the art of illusion. If you can fake competence, project charisma, surround yourself with loyal cronies and stab others in the back quietly, you can rule even if you lack substance. It's not the just or the smart who necessarily prevail, but often the most savvy manipulators. Machiavelli earned infamy for these ideas. His name became synonymous with political deceit, but he was less endorsing these dark truths than revealing them. As a warning to citizens, Machiavelli noted that the public can be dangerously complacent and gullible in the face of a charismatic, self-interested leader. He even pointed to a case from ancient history, Julius Caesar. In Machiavelli's analysis, Julius Caesar was a prime example of a leader who used appearances and public adoration to grab power, ultimately destroying the Roman Republic. Caesar was no fool. In fact, he was brilliant and cunning, but the people's failure to see through his ambition proved catastrophic. Machiavelli wrote that Julius Caesar was the first tyrant in Rome, with the result that Rome was never again free. How did this happen? Through theatrics and charm. Picture Rome in 44 BC. Caesar returns from war, a hero to the masses, his name on every tongue. The people offer him a crown, literally a king's diadem, in a grand public festival. Caesar dramatically refuses it, not once but 3 times, each refusal making the crowd love him more. This was a masterstroke of imagecraft. By appearing humble and disinterested in absolute power, he convinced Romans of his selflessness, even as he was named dictator for life. It was political theater at its finest. The reality. Caesar was consolidating power step by step, all while maintaining a facade of reluctance. The senators who finally stabbed him to death realized, too late, that they had been played by his performance of humility. Caesar's ascent illustrates a crucial point. Intelligence isn't required to gain power if those in power, or the masses, are naive enough to be fooled. In his case, Caesar's own cunning was at work, but to the Roman public, perception mattered more than truth, just as Machiavelli observed. They perceived a benevolent, reluctant leader. The truth was an autocrat in the making. The fall of the Roman Republic was sealed by a collective failure to distinguish appearance from reality. Machiavelli's warning reverberates through time. Beware the charming leader who tells you exactly what you want to hear, who cultivates an image of greatness. For such a person can take absolute power before you realize it. Not every case of a fool in power is so dramatic, but the dynamics often rhyme with Caesar's story. Some leaders are indeed clever in their manipulation, like Caesar or any number of modern demagogues. Others are genuinely ignorant or inept, yet still ride a wave of false perception to positions of authority. Let's turn to one of history's most notorious fools in power, a man whose reign became a byword for vanity and incompetence, Emperor Nero of Rome. His story shows how a truly unqualified person can ascend to the pinnacle and what they do once they get there. Marble head of Emperor Nero, reigned 54-68 AD. Nero's rise to power owed more to family scheming than personal merit, and his reign became infamous for incompetence and excess. In the annals of history, Nero stands out as a leader who by most measures never should have been in power. He was young, frivolous, and more interested in art and debauchery than governance. Yet through a twist of dynasty and ruthless ambition of others, Nero became the ruler of the vast Roman Empire. How? Simply, he was born into it. Nero was the beneficiary of familial connections and court intrigue. His mother, the cunning Agrippina, manipulated her way into marrying Emperor Claudius and convinced Claudius to favor young Nero as his successor. At the tender age of 17, Nero was crowned emperor, not due to talent or experience, but due to the scheming of a power-hungry parent. It was an over-reliance on bloodline and nepotism. As one historian noted, Roman culture put family ties above competence in leadership choices. Once in power, Nero quickly revealed how ill-suited he was to rule a great empire. Early in his reign, he was guided or restrained by wise advisors, the philosopher Seneca and the general Burrus, and during that period Rome managed well. But as Nero gained confidence and sidelined his mentors, his true priorities and peculiarities emerged. The ancient accounts, admittedly colored by gossip, portray Nero as fixated on his own pleasures and glory rather than the welfare of Rome. He fancied himself a great artist and performer. In fact, Nero seemed more obsessed with being an artist than a politician, one historian notes. Poetry and theater were his passions, not law or statecraft. These are noble pursuits in themselves, but they were not the right skills for a leader. While he sang on stage and raced chariots, the machinery of empire was neglected or entrusted to sycophants. Then came the event that etched Nero's name into infamy, the Great Fire of Rome in 64 AD. The city was engulfed in flames for days. Legend has it that Nero fiddled while Rome burned, playing his lyre and singing as his capital suffered. The reality is more nuanced. Reportedly, Nero took some measures to help, but his indifference and theatrics during the crisis outraged people. Whether myth or truth, the image of Nero idly indulging in artistic fantasy while his city burned became a searing symbol of gross incompetence and misplaced priorities. After the fire, Nero did rebuild the city, but also seized the opportunity to construct a lavish new palace for himself, the Golden House, fueling rumors that he had started the fire intentionally. True or not, it solidified Nero's reputation as a self-absorbed, out-of-touch ruler. Under Nero's watch, Rome's stability deteriorated. He executed those who opposed or even mildly criticized him, including eventually his own mother. He exhausted the treasury on indulgences. The empire that had been built on military discipline and administrative competence groaned under the weight of Nero's caprice and incompetence. Finally, even the legions had enough. Rebellions broke out, and Nero was declared a public enemy by his own Senate. The once powerful emperor, abandoned and fearful, took his own life, reportedly exclaiming, "What an artist dies in me!" Even at the end, blind to the realities of his failed leadership. Nero's tragicomic reign illuminates a key reason fools gain and hold power. The structure of the system allowed it. In an imperial system, birth and flattery can elevate an unworthy man, and once at the top, an emperor is hard to remove. Nero surrounded himself with weaker subordinates who would not challenge him, preferring flatterers and sycophants over honest advisors. Machiavelli actually warned of this sign of a poor ruler. The first method for estimating the intelligence of a ruler is to look at the men he has around him, he wrote. A wise leader appoints capable, honest ministers, but a foolish or insecure leader often does the opposite, stocking his court with mediocrity to avoid being upstaged. Nero did exactly that. Once Seneca and Burrus were gone, he elevated non-entities who owed him everything. In doing so, he insulated himself from criticism and lived in an echo chamber of praise, never hearing the truth of his failures. This pattern is not unique to Nero. It recurs in many regimes and organizations where a weak leader clings to power. By now, a picture is emerging of how stupidity or incompetence can ascend to power. Bold lies, hollow confidence, nepotism, image management, and eliminating capable rivals. But there is another essential ingredient, the complicity of followers. Power is never gained in a vacuum. Why do people accept, or even embrace, foolish leaders? This is where psychology offers chilling insights. We humans are not the rational, discerning creatures we imagine ourselves to be when it comes to choosing our leaders. We are swayed by bias, emotion, and cognitive shortcuts, and the would-be Machiavellian rulers know how to exploit these weaknesses. One major factor is confidence. We often mistake confidence for competence. Studies and real-world observations show that loud, assertive individuals are frequently assumed to be more capable or knowledgeable than they truly are. In job interviews, politics, or any competition for leadership, the person who sounds sure of themselves tends to win out over the person who says, "I'm not certain," or "let's consider this carefully." As one commentator noted, their false confidence is mistaken for competence, their manipulation is rewarded with trust, their surface charm is interpreted as leadership. This is precisely how narcissists and fools often rise. They radiate certainty, even unjustified certainty, and people gravitate to that assuredness like moths to a flame. Meanwhile, truly competent people who understand complexity and doubt may sound less sure. Ironically, the very trait of wisdom, knowing the limits of one's knowledge, can sound like weakness while the hallmark of fools, ignorant certainty, sounds like strength. Another factor is our need for cognitive closure. Psychologists describe this as a desire for clear, black and white answers and quick decisions, a discomfort with ambiguity. When faced with uncertainty or crises, many people find comfort in a decisive leader who projects absolute certainty, even if that certainty is unfounded. A leader who says, "I alone can fix it," or "Trust me, everything is simple," appeals to that psychological hunger for clarity. We want to believe in the person with a strong, simple narrative, as opposed to the one who admits problems are complex. Machiavelli keenly understood this aspect of human nature. He observed that people are fickle and easily persuaded in the short term, and if persuasion fails, a leader can rely on force. Modern research echoes his cynicism. Under stress, populations often choose the certain leader over the thoughtful one. This helps explain why electorates sometimes hand power to bombastic, shallow candidates over more qualified rivals. The former sounds sure and strong, giving a sense of psychological relief. Flattery and tribalism also play their roles. Many leaders rise by telling a particular group what they want to hear, flattering their prejudices, scapegoating others for problems, and creating an us versus them mentality. This can cause otherwise sensible people to overlook a leader's obvious flaws or idiocy because he validates their desires or anger. The followers deceive themselves. In a way, a phenomenon Machiavelli also noted: people will readily deceive themselves about things they badly want. A populace desperate for security might overlook a leader's incompetence in favor of his tough talk. A company board dazzled by a charismatic salesman might hand him the CEO title, ignoring his lack of technical skill because they want to believe in his vision. And once a fool gains power, a self-reinforcing cycle kicks in. Power itself creates an aura of legitimacy. There's a Machiavellian dictum: he who has the power is always right, the weaker is always wrong. This doesn't mean the powerful are truly right, of course. It means people tend to defer to power and assume it must have been earned or is at least deserved. In many organizations, there's an implicit belief that if someone became the boss, they must know what they're doing. Thus, even if that person is making absurd choices, subordinates hesitate to challenge them, thinking perhaps he sees something we don't. This deference allows poor leaders to continue unchecked. It might take a catastrophe or scandal to finally shatter the illusion. These patterns aren't confined to dusty history books. They surround us today. Consider the archetype of the incompetent corporate leader. We've all heard of, or worked for, the manager who has no clue what they're doing, yet somehow keeps getting promoted. How do such people thrive in modern meritocracies? The stories from within corporate ranks mirror what Machiavellian history teach. Often, these individuals are masters of impression management. They talk a big game, align themselves with higher-ups, and take credit for others' achievements while skillfully shifting blame for failures. One professional recounts working with a man who took credit for things he didn't do, shifted blame the second something went wrong, and surrounded himself with sycophants. Sound familiar? It's a textbook strategy for the incompetent to survive. Steal accomplishments, deny responsibility, and ensure no one around you threatens your position. Such a person might not have any real talent for the business, but they excel at office politics, which often counts more in climbing the ladder. Their superiors see only a smooth, confident facade. The problems and discontent are swept under the rug. In these environments, Machiavellian tactics are very much alive. The incompetent leader might deceive higher management with optimistic reports that mask underlying issues. Recall Machiavelli's emphasis on deception over force. They might create scapegoats, a hapless employee to blame when things go wrong, thus deflecting scrutiny from themselves. And certainly, they practice the art of kissing up and kicking down, flattering their own bosses, appearing loyal and capable upward, while bullying or ignoring the subordinates who actually do the work. Through these methods, genuinely ignorant leaders can persist for years, even as their division or company slowly hemorrhages. By the time the truth comes out, if it ever does, they have often moved up to even higher positions, leaving the wreckage behind. This is sometimes called the Peter principle in management. People rise to their level of incompetence. Politics offers even starker examples. We have witnessed leaders elected on waves of populist fervor who later exhibit breathtaking ineptitude or ignorance of basic governance. Yet their supporters might remain fiercely loyal, drawn in by identity, emotion, or the leader's unshakable bravado. Such leaders often follow the same Machiavellian playbook. They attack the press or any source of accountability that could expose their incompetence. They fill their administrations with loyalists, often less qualified, rather than independent experts. And they relentlessly promote a grandiose image, staging photo ops, rallies, and propaganda to maintain the illusion of effectiveness. The result is a kind of theatre state where substance matters far less than spectacle. In some cases, the consequences are merely comical or unfortunate. In others, they are deadly serious. We need not name names to see this pattern unfolding in headlines around the world. Narcissistic, ignorant leaders have managed to attain power in various countries, riding on the promise of simplistic solutions to complex problems. Once in office, they sometimes flounder, but they also learn that to admit error is to lose face, so they double down on false promises, dismiss experts, and blame scapegoats, minorities, foreigners, predecessors, elites, you name it. This too Machiavelli anticipated. He counseled princes to appear decisive and resolute. Admitting weakness or changing course under pressure could erode one's authority. Thus, the fool in power must forever pretend to be infallible, and sadly many people will believe it, at least for a time. The costs of such misrule are enormous. Companies run by inept executives eventually falter, employees suffer, investors lose money, sometimes scandals erupt. Think of the Enron debacle or other corporate frauds fueled by hubris and deception. Nations led by foolish rulers face stagnation, corruption, even collapse. Lives can be lost when incompetent commanders lead armies or when unqualified officials mismanage a crisis. History is littered with tragedies wrought by leadership failures, from military disasters under delusional generals to economic depressions worsened by blundering policymakers, to preventable pandemics mishandled by denial and dithering. When stupid people gain power, everyone under their influence pays a price. Is there any hope in this grim cycle? Are we doomed to be led by Nero-like fools and Machiavellian pretenders? The answer, thankfully, is that awareness is our first line of defense. By understanding these dynamics, by seeing how appearance can trump reality and how our own minds can be swayed by confidence and charisma, we empower ourselves and our communities to make better choices. Knowledge truly is power, the power to discern the real from the fake, the wise leader from the charlatan. Firstly, we must cultivate skepticism. Not cynicism that rejects all leaders, but healthy skepticism of those who seem too good to be true. If a candidate at work or in politics presents themselves as the flawless savior, question it. Recall Machiavelli's insight. If someone is eager to deceive, there will always be those ready to be deceived. Let's not be those people. When a leader's image is impeccable, look closer at their actions and results. Do they take responsibility? Do they listen to advice, or do they just boast and blame? Are they surrounding themselves with strong team members or just yes men? If it's the latter, beware. Secondly, we can push for systems of accountability. Good governance, whether in a company or country, requires checks and balances that constrain the power of any one fool. Ancient Rome fell prey to Caesars and Neros in part because the Republican guardrails failed and one man could rule unchecked. In modern democracies, institutions like a free press, independent courts, and vigilant legislatures can curb the excesses of an unfit leader. In businesses, boards of directors, auditors, and whistleblower protections serve a similar role. We should support and strengthen these checks. A Machiavellian tyrant's worst enemy is a populace that demands transparency and a system that swiftly exposes lies. If deception is the ladder to power, truth is the force that can pull the ladder down. For us as individuals, it's also about valuing substance over style in everyday life. When choosing whom to follow or promote, resist the allure of glib charm. Look for those who have demonstrated competence, humility, and integrity, even if they aren't the loudest voice in the room. Encourage a culture in your workplace, community, or even family where questions are encouraged and knowledge is respected, so that quiet competence isn't overshadowed by loud incompetence. If you find yourself under the thumb of a stupid boss or leader, band together with others who see the truth, document the issues, speak up if possible, shine a light on the reality that's being obscured by the leader's smoke and mirrors. It might not always succeed immediately. Power, after all, protects itself, but it plants the seeds of change. Remember the story from the professional world. The narcissistic manager stayed and the whistleblower left a sadly common outcome. But when such stories are told and retold, they raise awareness in others, maybe preventing the next such figure from climbing so high. Machiavelli's work, often reviled for its cold-blooded advice to rulers, ironically offers us the ruled a form of enlightenment. By reading The Prince not as a manual to emulate, but as a confession of the tyrants, we can spot their tricks. When we hear a leader spouting comforting half-truths, we can remember Machiavelli's words that people readily believe what they wish to be true. When we see a leader cultivating a cult of personality, we recall how Caesar postured humility to hide ambition, or how Nero silenced honest counsel to hear applause only. History gives us endless case studies in what not to fall for again. Finally, there is a hopeful flip side to the Dunning-Kruger effect and the paradox of power. Just as the foolish overestimate themselves, the wise often underestimate themselves. This means many capable, decent people hold back from leadership, doubting if they're good enough, while far less capable people charge ahead. If you are a person of competence and conscience, perhaps the lesson is to step up. The world has enough arrogant fools vying for power. It needs more humble, smart people to have the courage to lead despite their self-doubts. Machiavelli did prefer, after all, a republic led by informed citizens over a tyranny of one. Our best antidote to bad leaders is good leadership. Our best answer to cunning deception is intelligence and integrity in action. In conclusion, the rise of stupid people to power is not a mystery, but a consequence of human flaws, both in leaders and followers. Understanding this should not make us despair, but rather motivate us. We can pierce the facade of the pretenders by remembering that confidence isn't competence, charisma isn't character, and soundbites aren't solutions. We can check our own tendency to be impressed by bravado and instead demand proof of ability and honesty. We can support structures that prevent power from concentrating unchecked in any one person's hands, because even a genius should not rule unrestrained, much less a fool. History will always have its Neros and foolish CEOs, its charlatans and strongmen. But it also has its Marcus Aureliuses and competent unsung managers, its true public servants and visionary leaders, people who wield power with wisdom and humility. By learning Machiavelli's dark truths, we do not have to accept a dark outcome. Instead, we arm ourselves with insight to ensure that the next Machiavellian schemer or overconfident incompetent is recognized for what they are. We, the people, can then choose differently or design our organizations to filter out the pretenders. The powerful may often pretend to be wise, but the truly wise will see through the pretense. And as viewers and citizens, armed with this knowledge, we can refuse to be the someone who allows himself to be deceived. In doing so, we take a stand, however quietly, for a world where competence, truth, and accountability triumph over stupidity, lies, and blind ambition. That is a future Machiavelli himself, with all his pessimism, would likely approve of, because it means we have learned from the very tricks he warned us about. Let the fools play their games. we will be watching with open eyes. In your own communities, have you seen instances where these patterns have played out? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if you found this video valuable, subscribe to Echoes of Wisdom for more insightful analysis like this. Thanks for watching.